Yesterday, Green Party leader Roderick O'Gorman was saying the re-election of Trump would be a disaster for the US, Ireland and the planet. Do you disagree with him?
Well, I think, I'm in government. I think we have responsibility to Ireland, to the national interest, and to our economic interests, and therefore, we have to accept the democratic will of the American people, and we have to work with the new administration. The country worked with the first Donald Trump administration in 2016 to 2020. We will have to do the same over the next 4 years. Now, clearly, there are genuine issues. Climate is one, because we had made significant progress globally since COP26 in Glasgow, when the UK and the US and Europe came together to really, with China and others, to drive a very substantial degree of progress, I would have thought, compared to what had happened before then. So it's going to take a lot of work to try and keep the global climate agenda on the right trajectory.
Is it just the climate you're worried about when it comes to Trump?
No, but I think, that's existential for the world. I mean, there's no point in saying anything else. I mean, that is, when you look at it from a global perspective. Economically, Ireland has an incredibly important and strategic relationship with America. I mean, over 200,000 direct jobs are supported by American companies in Ireland. We support 100,000 jobs in America, Irish companies do. And then there's many, many indirect jobs, and the trade is in the billions between Ireland and America. So when I say the national interest, I mean our economic interest has to be protected, has to be nurtured, and we've got to work with the new administration to protect jobs in Ireland, and that's going to be critical.
Yeah, America First is Donald Trump's tagline, as you know. He has been vocal on his plans to reduce the corporation tax rate to 15% for companies that manufacture in the US. And we know that's critical for Ireland, given the US multinationals that actually manufacture here. How worried are you about the implications, given our reliance on those US multinationals, Tánaiste, and their declaration of tax here?
Well, we have a fairly embedded American presence in terms of multinationals in the pharmaceutical area, biopharmaceutical, medical devices, technology, financial services. Many of those won't move anywhere too quickly. I think we've got to watch new investments coming in. And we did sign up to the OECD tax framework. And it seems that the new US administration may jettison that or may not agree with that. We'll see. But nonetheless, we have to keep a weather vane eye on that.
I mean, why are you so sure that companies who operate here won't make a decision based on changes that may arise as a result of this Trump presidency?
Well, companies who are based here have been here for a long, long time. I mean, you don't uproot a company like Intel in terms of the chip manufacturing, and they want the chip manufacturing base in Europe. And likewise, many of the pharmaceuticals, we have been very reliable partners. During COVID, for example, many of those companies said to me, Ireland's plants were the few plants in the world that never stopped, because we managed to keep productivity going. And our tax regime has been certain and has been one of continuity. I think where we have to, the bigger worry, I think we have to make sure that we get the utilities right, that we invest more in the energy grid, that we invest more in water infrastructure and in housing in order to protect that investment. Now, will it come under challenge if President Trump goes ahead with what he's indicated he will do? We'll have to wait and see in terms of whether he'll do that, to what degree he will do it. He's not the first American president-elect to say that they were going to try and tackle or endeavour to bring back industry back into America. But remember, these American companies are global companies now. They need access to the European market. They need access to the Asian market. They need, and Ireland has been a very good base and location for them to have that access.
So you don't believe he's going to follow through, or at least you're not so sure at this point?
Well, nobody can be, because we know from previous administrations that the devil is in the detail, and there's a lot of working out of policies to be done yet. I hope, and remember, there has been a more protectionist trend in American politics, not just on the Republican side, but indeed on the Democrat side. I mean, President Biden brought in the IRA Act, and Europe had to respond to that because it involves subsidization of American manufacturing over and above that of European manufacturing. And so the Technology and Trade Council has been used between the US and Europe to try and even out that and to try and work on that question. So there has been a more inward-looking protectionist view in America. Some of that, by the way, is happening in Europe.
Right.
If we get a tariff war, we all lose. That's the point.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the tariff threat there, because that's what Donald Trump has said he's going to do. He's going to slap tariffs on EU imports. And given that Ireland is the biggest per capita exporter to the US among EU member states, do you acknowledge that this is a direct threat to our export trade?
It's a huge concern. I think protectionism in general is a negative for Ireland. And that's why in the European Union, we've been warning against protectionist tendencies that some of the larger states have begun to talk about. If Europe and America gets into a tariff war, so in other words, America puts tariffs on European goods, then Europe will respond by putting tariffs on American goods. Nobody wins. And
do you worry that will happen?
I think we have to work very hard to avoid it. It's clearly an issue that's on the agenda. How it actually transpires, we've got to wait and see. But many in Europe have been scenario planning. Europe is a strong economy. Europe is a huge market. Most companies want to be in the European market. So I think don't underestimate the power of American industry and corporate America, who will want policies that underpin the strength of American companies, not just in America, but globally.
Okay. Has the Cabinet been briefed on what impact a Trump presidency may have?
Not in any detailed way, although I have clearly, my department have worked up advices and sort of different scenarios, and we have shared that with the Taoiseach's office.
So there's a document in place for this day?
Various scenarios have been worked up as to the potential areas where we have to be careful, where we have to, in terms of the policies that could come our way, that we have to make sure we can engage early with the new administration. But there's a lot to play for here, and the world is interdependent.
So you do see key risks then, if you've drawn up a policy. There has been briefing behind the scenes on the outcome of this election and where a Trump presidency may leave Ireland.
Yeah, and there's pluses and minuses, but a lot remains to be seen, because we know from the first administration that the country was in a position to engage with that administration. We also had the independence to criticise issues or policies that were developed, which we would still retain. But I do think the number one priority has to be our economic interests and protecting employment in Ireland, and making sure with our partners in Europe, because this is a European relationship as well with the United States. And on trade, for example, trade is a European competency. The European Commission has exclusive control over trading policy. So we're part of a 27-member state bloc, which is a powerful economic union in itself. And America has to engage with that powerful bloc and work out agreements that make sense for both.
Do you believe jobs are potentially at risk here, Tánaiste?
I think we need to be careful of using that language yet. I think I've been here before. I remember previous American presidents, some Democrats who said they were going to, bring back industry and so on. But the world is a different place, and the world is not one of individual silo blocks. It's a country where we're all interdependent on each other. When I was in China last year, Foreign Minister Wang Yi made that point, that notwithstanding all of the challenges with China and trade, they too get it, that it's an interdependency, and no one can go it alone.
All right, let's talk about foreign policy implications and the implications for Ukraine. Donald Trump is likely to decrease US support for Ukraine, given the public commentary we've heard from him to date. And he has suggested that the country may have to cede some of its land to Russia to make a peace deal. Would you back that?
Well, I think, first of all, he is more of a transactional politician. So I don't see that he's going to engage with Ukraine on its own. He will also endeavour to engage with President Putin, perhaps. And for our perspective, any resolution of that war has to be based on the UN Charter and sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. That's the European position. Because
but the US is a big player here. You'll have to acknowledge that.
Absolutely. I mean,
on Zelensky, he said he should never have let this war start. The war is a loser.
He never did let the war start.
But that's what Donald Trump has said about that.
Well, I'm saying President Putin invaded Russia, or invaded Ukraine. President Putin invaded Ukraine, and did so in the most egregious way, and he's attacked civilian infrastructure. No, President Trump doesn't like wars, and he said he's going to end wars. So that depends, and in a way that's not a bad sentiment, but obviously the terms of how those wars end is going to be key.
And I mean, that is the sense that, he has said, I started no major wars during my last time in the White House. He's not hawkish. But on the Middle East, Ireland has maintained its strong ties with the US, despite them funding and arming Israel's war in Gaza. Do you expect a change under the Trump administration, given that this Trump victory is also being viewed as a win for Netanyahu.
It is, because he has been a supporter of Prime Minister Netanyahu, as indeed the Democratic president had too. But although the Democratic President Joe Biden was seeking peace, was endeavouring to put pressure to get peace, or to get a ceasefire at least, and to get aid into Gaza, it remains to be seen again how President Trump will deal with this issue. He was involved in the Abraham Accords on the last occasion, but those accords were in a time of relative peace. There was no war compared to what's happening now. So it's going to be very difficult to resurrect the Abraham Accords, for example, between the US, Israel and Saudi Arabia, unless the Palestinian question is dealt with. And the two-state solution from a European perspective and Irish perspective is the only viable way forward in our view. Palestinians' right to self-determination has to be recognised. There will not be peace in the Middle East if there is not parity esteem for the Palestinian people, and if they do not have self-determination, because the only way you can have people living as good neighbours and in a sort of harmonious way is, in our view, through the two-state solution. President Trump hasn't been a great supporter of that, let's be clear. Yeah,
from what you're saying, it's a wait-and-see approach as far as you're concerned. You don't really know.
Well, I think the evidence will be that he's supportive of Israel's position, but he may, given that he's on the other hand saying he wants to end wars, there is no basis for the continuation of this war in Gaza or indeed in Lebanon. No basis anymore. I mean, Hezbollah has been decapitated, Hamas has been degraded. It now represents collective punishment of the Palestinian people. What's going on in Gaza and what's going on in northern Gaza is horrific, and it should stop. And likewise in Lebanon, there is a ceasefire deal on the table, and the Israeli government will have to, if there's to be peace, would have to agree to it. So would Hezbollah. And Hezbollah needs to agree a ceasefire, Hamas needs to agree a ceasefire, and the hostages need to be released. And those moves would make the prospect of a ceasefire more viable.
Okay. Tánaiste, I want to ask you, I suppose, about the Irish response now and the call for Irish action on the issue around Gaza. The Ditch is reporting how the US Ambassador Claire Cronin warned your office and that of the Taoiseach of the consequences if the government enacted the Occupied Territories Bill. Can you confirm that correspondence?
Well, first of all, the US Ambassador, my understanding is, did write or contact our officials in respect of the BDS movement in America. A lot of American states have adopted anti-boycott, disinvestment approaches and policies, and was pointing out to our officials that essentially those states look at any boycott on imports from the occupied territories as akin to Israel. We would disagree fundamentally with that.
So how did you respond?
I haven't responded yet at all. We've initiated the progress of this bill now.
But there was no official response, I suppose,
no, I haven't
from
responded.
You or your department to the ambassador.
But sorry, embassies do that all the time. There's no big deal there. Everyone's the Ditch report. Ambassadors are there to communicate issues to the government of the day. It happens across all embassies. No big deal there at all. But we have progressed the bill now. We had a hearing yesterday in the Foreign Affairs Committee on the bill. I pointed out the legal difficulties with the bill as it's currently framed. It's unconstitutional, and
how is it unconstitutional?
Because it gives powers to the Minister for Foreign Affairs in respect of designating any part of the world as an occupied territory, which under the Constitution only the government can do that. Now that can be rectified and that can be amended, but as it currently stands, it's unconstitutional. Also, we want to change the bill to focus on Palestine as opposed to occupied territories all over the world, and we think it has a better chance of withstanding a legal challenge, because it's our view this will be legally challenged. We think the International Court of Justice's advisory opinion last July gives us a legal pathway to produce legislation and to ban the importation of products from the occupied territories. Now, that pathway is through the ICJ advisory opinion. It could still be legally challenged, so we've got to strengthen the bill. We've got to make it more robust so that it can withstand that challenge. And I think there's been a lot of noise around the bill, but the reality is You couldn't do those amendments. We've identified about 14 areas. I said yesterday to the committee it needs substantive amendment. In fairness to Francis
Did you not
Black,
have time to consider that, seeing as it was sitting on the shelf for so many years?
No, it wasn't. The ICJ advisory opinion only came out last July. And in fact...
But you backed, Fianna Fáil backed the enactment of that bill a number of years ago.
When we were in opposition, yeah. And it went to second stage. Then the then government took legal advice from the then Attorney General, who said it was unconstitutional and it contravened European law, which still remains the case, but the ICJ advice has come, which we believe gives us an opportunity to create a pathway, which will still not be without risk. In other words, we think we will be challenged. France was challenged in respect of the Western Sahara and lost 3 weeks ago on a similar type of point. So this is not easy.
Have you a time frame in place?
We would hope that when the new government is after this general election, the amendments will be... My team is working in the Department of Foreign Affairs on amendments already. And we've already had meetings with Francis Black's team to identify the areas where we think amendment is required. We would hope to have amendments ready. We'll have amendments ready for the new government when it's in place. Now that depends on negotiations post-election and so on like that. But the amendments will be ready.
It will take time, you're saying?
Well, it'll take a number of months maybe, but it could be done. I mean, we could have the amendments done before the end of the year.